All right, at long last, the user interface for reality. Some of these things you're going to say, hey, I've heard about those. I've heard about them in your book, Win Bigly. I've heard about them in your book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And I saw a few things in your latest book, Loserthink. And that is where you should go if you want any detail on these, but let me run through them. First, you must accept the frame, at least as a filter, that there could be a subjective reality and that you can manipulate it. Again, you might only be manipulating your own impression of reality, but that's good enough if it predicts well and gets you to a happy place. You should accept that systems work better than goals. People are telling me every day that after reading my book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, they implemented systems and it changed their life. This is one of the biggest buttons on the interface for life. If you don't like where you are and you want to go somewhere else, learn how to build systems for everything from your diet to your career to your social life to fitness, everything. And that's in this book if you want more details. Talent stacking, also from the same book. The idea that if you intelligently add new talents, you become not just a little bit better, but exponentially better because talents really explode your capability and your options. So this is one of the biggest buttons on the interface to reality. Now you've seen these before, a few of them, but it's the totality of them that I'm trying to present. You've seen them individually. Affirmations, the idea of writing down or visualizing your goals, seems to be something that gives you the impression that it works. And I say that very carefully. Does it work? Do affirmations change reality? I don't know. But I can tell you that when I've used them, the results I've gotten don't seem like anything could have been natural. I mean, I cured an incurable voice problem. I had ridiculous stock market luck when I used the affirmations. My career, as I told you, is just crazy. And it feels like it works. But I'm not going to tell you it does. Again, you should see these as filters. If it feels like it works, keep doing it. All right, you should know that the mating instinct is the base of pretty much all of your impulses. So if you haven't learned that pretty much everything from the way you talk, present yourself, hold yourself, dress, everything you do is some kind of expression of your mating instinct, whether you like it or not. Everything you show off about, everything that you don't want to show if you have a flaw, pretty much everything you do comes back to wanting to look good and present yourself well for mating purposes. Once you understand that, you start to understand where the buttons are, all right? Because you'll say, oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll see it everywhere. And it's like the veil will come off and you'll start seeing everybody's actions as, wait a minute, why is it everything is compatible with that showing off for mating purposes situation? Here are the other buttons, which are mostly self-explanatory, but freedom is a big thing. People will trade a lot for freedom. You could say, would you like a bad life with freedom or a good life with no freedom? And people will take the bad life with freedom. So if you ever have a chance to create a situation where you can offer someone more freedom, that's very powerful. That's a button. And you should get as much for yourself as you can, and you can use it as a tool to help other people get what they want, because they will trade a lot for freedom. And freedom can come in the form of getting money, that gives you freedom, having a flexible schedule, being in the right kind of social situation, etc. So there's lots of ways to get it. Fear is a motivator. I don't recommend using it unless you're trying to save somebody. You could use fear to keep them from smoking cigarettes, for example, but I wouldn't use this in the evil way. Curiosity is one of the most important and overlooked buttons on the human interface. You can see that authors that are good at it will make you curious at the end of a chapter so that you'll want to keep reading. So building curiosity into things is a really, really important button. You'll see that President Trump does this often because he'll tease things that are coming. He'll say, yes, well, I got an announcement on that, and Tomorrow you're going to hear about that, and I think you're going to be really, impressed. When you can stoke somebody's curiosity, you can really shape what they do, and you can shape your environment through curiosity. Very, very powerful. You notice how I use this to get you to come here. Novelty is very important for memory. So you want to make sure that you always inject novelty. It's what triggers memory, because your brain will get bored of the sameness. So you need to trigger memory and attention with novelty. Contrast is a way to get people to move from where they are to where you want them to be. You just say, well, it's much less expensive than this. So contrast is one of the most important buttons. Use contrast often. Hey, you don't want to be this bad. You could be over here. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. The more you repeat, the more the wiring gets solidified. And if you keep things simple, the brain can process it and deal with it. If it's complicated, your brain has a tendency to just flush it out. Can't deal with it, flush it out. So simplicity is important. The fake because is a form of pseudo-logic. Sometimes you need to get people moving with a fake reason that doesn't even actually pass logical standards, but people don't need logical reasons. Just look at politics. People have incredibly different opinions, and many of them are smart. So if you've got smart people on opposite sides of basically every issue, you can see that they don't need real reasons. We're not a species that operates on real reasons. We'll take a fake reason, we'll take one we made up, we'll take a guess, we'll follow our friends. Once you understand that people don't need real reasons, it frees you. Because if you're locked in a little world at a lower level of awareness where you say, well, I'm not going to convince somebody unless I have a real reason. Sorry, that's not the reality any of us live in. Real reasons are good. I mean, if you have them, use them. But we don't need them. Once you know you don't need them, and that reality can be authored, you're in better shape. Pacing and leading, I've talked about. That's just matching somebody until they feel comfortable with you, and then you can lead them. People can be very influenced by aspirations. This is another way to refer to the high ground maneuver. The high ground maneuver is essentially you challenge somebody to be a better version of themselves. It's sort of the Jesus method, right? It's not telling you you must do something or you'll die. That's fear. Aspiration is, don't you want to be the better version of yourself? Don't you want to be the person who sees the big picture? Very, very important button. Association. You know that any quality of one thing rubs off on the other. If you want somebody to like something, pair it with something else they like already. So the likability of one thing will rub off on another, but also the unlikability. So for example, if you have a TV show, let's say the news, and you have commercials that are really unpleasant, eventually the unpleasantness bleeds into the show, and it would be better if you associated only things that were positive. So learning to associate only with positive things, one of the most important user interface rules of reality. I accidentally put contrast twice, forget that. Pattern recognition, once you realize that the humans are not logical machines, we're pattern recognition machines. And it's that pattern recognition that isn't very good. Pattern recognition is what makes you a racist. Pattern recognition is what makes you an ageist, a sexist, everything bad. Because your patterns are all you have. You're not really a logical person who reasons everything out. Your brain isn't big enough. You wouldn't have enough time. So instead, you default to these little biases, which are determined by patterns. Now, the problem is many of those patterns are fake. Let's say you had met 3 Elbonians in your life, and every one of them slapped you in the face with a glove. The next time you met an Elbonian, you'd be like, oh, no thank you. I don't want to get slapped in the face with a glove. Those last 3 Elbonians were pretty rough on me. But it's only 3 Elbonians. The odds that your pattern is predictive, probably low. So we fall victim to patterns, but you can also use patterns to convince people of things. If you are consistent, people will say, oh, This person's always honest. So patterns are a tool, but they're also our biggest defect, and you have to understand it that way. And then, of course, understanding the brain as a visualization machine is very, very important, because visualization is the biggest, most powerful part of your brain. It's the part that influences you most. And so, one more look at the full board there. And so the idea is that these buttons are the important ones. Visualization, if there's one there that just stands out as being the one that you should sort of focus on the most, visualization would be a good one. Now, these are the buttons for the user interface. I can tell you that almost every day I get a message from somebody who read this book, which was the beginning of this. I had to hide what this was in a practical book because the world wasn't ready to believe that facts don't matter. And the world wasn't ready to believe that you could author your own reality. So I played it a little safe in this one because the world wasn't ready. But if you want to learn about most of these things, they're in there. And then in Win Bigly, because President Trump had ripped apart the nature of the universe, it allowed me to say, now you see it, right? Facts don't matter. Now you see it, that they're just separate worlds and bubbles, and we can live in our bubble and we'll never know the difference. And then, of course, Loserthink tried to just, teach you to think better, because that's always going to be useful. You'll be more effective and you'll have a better handle on the user interface of reality if you can think and argue better. So, this is my lesson. I'm going to keep it on one topic. I hope this was useful. Maybe you could tell me in the comments if you got something out of this. This is the sort of lesson that might not change you tonight, but it's never going to leave you. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You're all changed. You don't know it yet. And this will become sort of let's say a framework that you now have added to your mental map. And now when you see things that fit that framework, it will get stronger over time. And so you'll see that this view of the world will take root, and then every time you compare it to the old way you saw, you're going to say to yourself, wow, is that a coincidence? Because this new way of looking at the world just feels like it predicts better, but I'll keep an eye on it. So this will get stronger and stronger over time, and maybe never stop getting stronger. Well, we're getting good comments, so I think that maybe we did our job here. And feel free to refer back to this often, and I think you've got everything you need now to author your own life. You are no longer a victim of reality. You are no longer the subject of reality. You're now an author. Some of you were already authors, and now you're better authors. And those of you who didn't know you could be an author of your reality, well, you just found out. And I will leave you on that, and you can have a terrific night tonight, and the rest of your life, it's looking good.